Is the world on the cusp of another 9/11? Are we staring down the barrel of another mass false flag, some type of shocking event that is going to shift the consciousness of the collective, as well as reshape the world as we know it? My name is Luke Bell from Astro Awakening, and on this channel I talk all things astrology and esoteric spirituality to try and help you navigate your awakening journey. So recently I've had a lot of people reach out to me in relation to 8/11, in particular November the 8th, 2024. I've had people from my social media, I've had clients, I've had random people that have just found my channel sort of ask me for my perspective, being that I'm a professional astrologer. I'd looked at some of the symbolism for 8/11 some time ago, but it's not something that I occupy too much of my time or energy because I'm a busy man. I have a pretty solid astrological practice. I also do energy management and healing, as well as past life regression therapy. I have family, I have a partner, I have a life, and I also have a new pet dog. So I'm a busy man, and it's not easy to keep my sort of consciousness across everything that's going on. However, I've had a bit of a look into the symbolism associated to 8/11, and in particular, the work of Annette from White Pill. I'm going to put her in the show notes, a link to her Telegram and her Instagram, as well as Be Free with D. In fact, I've been on Be Free with D's channel here on YouTube before. We did a podcast some time ago talking about astrology, so shout out to D and also to the work that Annette has been doing. So, if you're unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, what a lot of Annette and her followers have been doing is decoding symbolism around the numbers 8 and 11, and in particular, some type of mass event that could be taking place even here in Australia, maybe even locally for Sydney, Australia. I want to take a sort of really big perspective, an objective look at this in context to 9/11 and where we find ourselves now, and what I see as an astrologer happening as we transition from the Age of Pisces into the Age of Aquarius. I'm going to take a look at the symbolism and just give you an idea of how to think about symbolism as a language and what it conveys and how to understand it, and who uses it and why. We're going to take a look back at 9/11 because we have some data, astrological data, in relation to that event and what was happening for us cosmically, but also in relation to how that event triggered the USA birth chart. So if you're unfamiliar, everything that's born has a birth chart. You have a birth chart, your pets have a birth chart, your business has a birth chart, a country has a birth chart. Anything that you can pick that has a date of beginning has a birth chart. We can cast a chart from that moment, and we're potentially looking at the birth chart of it. So we have birth charts for people and countries and places and movies and all sorts of things. Events that happen can have like a birth chart or a natal chart associated to it. So when you look at 9/11 in comparison to the USA's birth chart, the birth of the independence of the USA, the 1776 chart, there's a lot that can be sort of a lot of information that we can find in relation to that chart at the time of the 9/11 event. Now, that was in 2001, and I was about 23 at the time. I didn't discover astrology and step onto my spiritual path until I was 34. I'm now 46. So, had I been into astrology pre 9/11, I can tell you now I would have been shouting from the rooftops that something pretty significant's about to go down just based on the astrology. In fact, I had some clients in Melbourne around 2019 that came to see me, and I remember foreshadowing 2020, not specifically around a pandemic, but just saying, look, things are about to go down in a really big way. And based on the information I'd given these particular people, they relocated out of Melbourne prior to the whole Armageddon. And forever and a day now, they're like, oh my God, that was based on the information you provided. So when we look cosmically, we can see the signature of certain astrological alignments and what they might represent for us for here going through this conscious experience. So if we look at 9/11 in context to that, we can gain a lot of insight as to what was being activated within the birth chart of that country, as well as what was happening for collectively. And it's pretty obvious once you understand the symbolism associated to the astrology of something massive was about to go down, or did go down, on 9/11. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to look at 8/11, November the 8th this year. And I've already put up a video. If you haven't watched that, I'll put the link in the show notes below. It's the previous video to this one. And I've sort of broke down the Mars retrograde cycle, and in particular the Mars opposite Pluto cycle, which is going to happen 3 times through this Mars retrograde phase, which is going to take us right through to May of 2025. So I've done a little bit of sort of explaining around some of the energetics associated with that. We're going to take a little bit of a deeper look here from a more esoteric and even symbolic or occult perspective. We're going to look at Australia's birth chart, and we're going to look at some of the cycle charts for Australia, in particular the directed solar arcs. I'll explain a little bit what that is, and the transits and how this is associated to it. How the transits or what's happening for us collectively connects to the Australia birth chart. We're going to look at the birth chart for the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and you might be thinking, why are you looking at the birth chart for the bridge? Well, the bridge has a birth chart. It's a pretty significant icon, and what it represents, it's world renowned. The Sydney Harbour Bridge is probably the most iconic thing out of Australia, other than man-made at least, other than an Uluru or a kangaroo. You've got the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I think most people around the world go, oh, that's, if they saw a picture of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, they'd probably say, I think that's from Australia. So it's very iconic. We're going to look at the birth chart for that, and also the transits to that birth chart for 8/11. And we're going to look at the astrocartography of where the particular alignments, the main alignments for 8/11 are running across the Earth. Sort of these planetary lines that run across the Earth and intersect certain locations. So we're going to have a look at that, and we're going to round this off with sort of a conclusion. Now, at the beginning of this video, I want you to understand this. I'm not here to tell you what to do or not to do. I'm not here to elicit panic or hysteria or have you sort of running around screaming like a headless chook. I'm here to present information and a perspective in the way I see things, and it's up to you to do with that as you see fit. One thing I will say is that as we move into the next 3 years, if you haven't already realized that in order for us collectively to awaken and to transform this world, it's up to each and every one of us to step up and take personal responsibility. Okay, so it's responsibility for your life, for your choices, for where you are, for what you're doing, for what you're not doing, for the decisions you make, for your situation. No longer blaming and becoming a victim, but saying, okay, it's up to me. So it's a big part of becoming your own sovereign, free being, becoming an authority of your own life, is that you have to take also responsibility. So this isn't about me telling you what you should or shouldn't be doing. That's up to you to make those decisions. I'm here to just present information in a certain way and the way I see it. It's my unique perspective. And my perspective is based on my journey, based on my education, based on my experience, based on the way I see it. Am I right? I don't know. Are there others that have differing opinions? Most likely. So I encourage you to find as many opinions and perspectives that can, and go with what resonates for you. Go with what sort of hits a chord. And if some of the stuff that I present today doesn't, that's fine. I'm okay with it. If some of it does and you're deciding to make decisions based on it, good for you. But just know that that's not on me. And should November 8 come and go and nothing happens, there's two sides of this story. One side is that, although you're all wrong, you got it wrong. And I'm not here to sort of get anything right. I'm just here to say, well, this is what I see in the astrology and the symbolism. This is what I see, and this is my point of view. So on that side of it, if I get it wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. I've been wrong many times. I was right about the Trump assassination. And I've been right a lot about COVID, and I've been right about a lot of things, but I'm also not right about everything, and I don't know everything. I know that what I know is that I don't know, and that's a great place to be. The other side of this will be, oh, we stopped it happening because we talked about it, or we spread the word, or we said it out. If there was something to happen that was very significant and was planned, I'm of the understanding and the belief that I don't think that it would be stopping anything. I think that's a foolish way to sort of think that we had some sort of impact on this. And this is much bigger than just the you and I and the what's going on. This is cosmic. This is universal. This is biblical. It's much bigger than the individual. So, we may be able to minimize the impact of such events should they take place. and hopefully, divert some people's paths, maybe out of danger or depending, have no impact at all. So on that side of it, I say if something very, very significant takes place and we were right, we're not here to try and be right. We're just here to try and present information. And I'll give you an example. If a month or so before 9/11, someone had put out a video that said they're about to fly planes into the side of the Twin Towers and bring them down, they're going to hijack a plane and fly it into the Pentagon, and then there's going to be hijacking planes, and this is going to go on. Be honest with yourself as what you would have thought at that time based on where you were then, not how you see the world now, but based on where you were then in your life. If someone had to come out and foreshadow that event for you, literally, not symbolically, but literally, would you have heeded that warning? Would you have taken notice? Would you have done anything different? Would you have gone, fuck, you're a weirdo, you're a crazy, you're a loon? What the hell are you talking about? So we are potentially in a similar situation. And even if 8/11 comes and goes, there will be another 9/11 type event. There'll be another COVID type event. Specifically, will it be around that? No, absolutely not. But to the magnitude and its impact and severity, absolutely. Like, wake up and smell the coffee. The world is rapidly changing. And whether we're ready or not, whether we like it or not, whether it's good or not, whether people are going to die or not, that's the reality we need to face. This is the part about becoming responsible. You have to be aware, like there's shit going on that we don't know by people that we don't see. So, and there's a game being played here at a much bigger level than you and I could ever imagine. So let's just you know, understand that whatever information comes along for this video or others like it or the stuff and the work that Annette's doing or Dee or anyone like this, it's not here to try and prove it to be right, to have some sort of egoic sort of, haha, yes, I was this person. I was happy to predict the Trump assassination, but I can tell you right now, if you watch that video, that part of the video was minuscule. That wasn't the reason for the video. It's just like, okay, he's probably going to attempt an assassination on the guy based on his astrology. As an astrologer, it's pretty obvious certain energetic signatures relate to certain things. You can sort of make loose predictions. So the reason for this video isn't so I can sort of grow my following or, be on the other side and go, well, I told you so. It's just to say, well, look, this is information. In some way, this may be helpful, irrespective of what may or may not go down for us collectively on November the 8th. That's a very significant astrological day with Mars Pluto opposition being triggered by the moon. And I've said this countless times in many videos, we're going to see a real peak in sudden death around that period of time. Mars being in the sign of Leo, which rules the heart. And opposite Pluto, we've got a lot of triggers to sensitive hearts, sensitive bloods. We're dealing with heart attacks, strokes, heart failures, blood issues, and the likes, and things are associated with that. And when we're dealing with Pluto, we're dealing with mass events. So there's going to be a personal connection to this period of time. I think everyone that's got eyes to see and ears to hear post-COVID knows the impact of certain inoculations had a big spike on sudden deaths. And it's maybe gone from someone like a cousin's, auntie's, uncle's, or my neighbor's friend, or this guy at school that I knew, versus to, oh shit, it was someone that was personal to me in some way. So, irrespective of what does or does not happen for us as an event-wise or mass hysteria or a 9/11 style event, I can bet you bottom dollar by the time we get into sort of early, mid to November, we're going to know there's going to be a lot of death as a result. And that's not because astrology is causing it, it's correlating to it. Energetically, it's like this is a clock, right? Is the clock time? No, the clock tells us the time. So the clock up there, is it doing this to us? No, we're a microcosmic mirror or reflection of the macrocosm. What's happening up there is reflected down here. Correlation, not causation. It's not like the planet did it. And I want you to sort of loosely let go of the idea of planets in relation to what NASA has said in the solar system and the whole galaxy and the gaseous giant and all of that. I give two shits about what that point of view or perspective is. This isn't about that. This is about understanding that energetically, cosmically, consciously, energy tends to manifest from source, pure source, undifferentiated God energy, quantum field potential to material manifestation. It does so in a structured order. And if we follow that structured order as it manifests from the highest realms to the lowest, we can sort of follow it and its frequency and its signatures. And the planets just so relate to these different functions or aspects of this energy that we experience as consciousness. So if we understand the planet's movements and positions, we can understand the flow of energy that manifests for us here in our life or lived experience. And that's what we're doing. Without further ado, let's understand what symbolism is. Symbolism conveys information beyond the rational logic and the reason. It transcends language barriers and races and cultural borderlines. Symbolism is a language that's universal. If you understand symbolism, you can understand that the universe is speaking to you, the sky is talking to you, and that the world is not as it seems. There is a quote here that I want to find. I think it's Manly P. Hall, and he wrote this book. I'll show it up for you now. And this quote on understanding symbolism. There's another one that's said to be attributed to Confucius, which is signs and symbols rule this world, not laws nor words. Okay? Signs and symbols rule this world, not laws nor words. So if you understand the signs and the symbols, then you can understand reality. You can understand the language that reality speaks. And then those that wish to manipulate reality, whether for their own self-serving purposes or for some other higher purpose, will then convey that process through symbolic language. They can't come out and tell you what they're going to do in a language that you understand, but they can symbolically foreshadow it. And if you are ignorant to the symbolic nature of their communication, that's on you. That's not on them. It's up to you to knock on that door and have it open. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be answered. Okay, it's up to you. And if you're ignorant to it, or if you're stuck in the illusion, we'll come to this shortly with the Age of Pisces. If you're stuck in the illusion and you're consciously unaware, that ignorance is no excuse for the law. Okay, it's not up to them to spell it out. Now, you might ask, well, why would they foreshadow something? And I think there's two sides to this. One side is they have to seed the collective consciousness with the idea of what's happening in this reality. Okay, so the way in which things are occurring and unfolding. And this isn't just day-to-day stuff, this is the big stuff. You know, the big events, the whole moon landing, the 9/11, the COVID things, right? The big events that happen, that are orchestrated in some way. And it doesn't take a brain or an Einstein to realize there's orchestration going on. This isn't just like, you know, people going, oh, this happened and people react a certain way. There's a level of orchestration going on. So one is to seed the collective consciousness with the idea. And the other is that karmically, if I tell you something and you do it anyway or don't do it as a result of whatever I've told you, like I've forewarned you. If you go ahead and choose to be ignorant of that warning, that's on you, that's not on me. So I'll give you an example of this. If I have some poison apples and I say to you, hey, would you like to buy a poison apple? It's $5. Now I've got these other ones that aren't poison, they're organic, but they're $500. So you can buy them if you want. But I got this one, it's poison, it's $5. If you go, oh shit, I haven't got 500, but fuck, I'll take the risk with the poison one for $5, and you eat that apple and die, I told you it was poison. It's not me. I told you the apple's poison. But if I say to you, hey, look at this juicy, delicious apple, and I know that's poisoned, and I don't tell you, and you eat that apple and die, that's on me. That's on me. because I've concealed something. I haven't been honest or truthful, and I haven't told you the full story, and you haven't been able to make a conscious decision on that, right? So, if I'm going to do something that could potentially impact you physically or be life altering or even life ending, and I've symbolically told you what's going to happen, and you've been ignorant in the way in which I've communicated that to you, unfortunately, that's on you. And the other thing about symbolism is it transcends borders, it transcends language barriers, race, religion, and cultural backgrounds. So it's not like they're going to come out and foreshadow in all the different foreign languages. Oh, we've got to foreshadow in Chinese. Now we've got to do it in English. Now we've got to. They just do it in symbolism because symbolism is a universal language. If you don't know that universal language, that's on your dumb ass, not theirs. So there is a need for foreshadowing, and they do this symbolically. Now, if you go back to years before 9/11, you can look in the Simpsons movie, the Matrix movie, you can look in Hollywood, you can look in the movies, you can look in the music industry, you look on album covers, and you can see foreshadowing very obvious now that we have hindsight and, sort of we can retrospectively go back. It's glaringly obvious that we're telling you what's about to happen. Okay, so the other thing that you may have heard in relation to 9/11 was that, and this is where one of the theories, it was the Jews that did it, the Israelis did it, right? Oops, there's the balloons. Because apparently it goes that the Jewish community had taken leave the day of 9/11, and there were very few Jewish people involved and around or caught up as victims in that event. And people go, well, they must have known. How'd they know? Well, the Jewish mysticism, um, pathway is known as the Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah has the tree of life as its main symbol. And the tree of life is basically a symbolic pictograph of the awakened man and the universe and the connection between the two. And within the Kabbalah, you have all of the astrological symbolisms, all of the elemental symbolisms, all of the tarot symbolisms, all of the Hebrew numerology. You have so much embedded within the Kabbalah. And if you're fundamentally Jewish, then you're using Hebrew language and you understand that's a symbolic language. You also loosely probably follow or understand the Kabbalah at some level. So the Kabbalah helps you decipher symbolic language. And if to your race that is fundamental to that understanding and the education of that is fundamental to your life, then you could sort of say that all of the Jewish people really did pre 9/11 was realize, oh, we read the symbolism and they're about to bring down the twins, collapsing the twins. Okay, so it's not that the Jews may be involved in it or they had something to do with it. And maybe some of them took advantage of it. I definitely think so. Absolutely, financially. But I think mostly they just were aware. They're like, oh, well, we're not silly. We understand that they've been foreshadowing this event. And we've read the news, so to speak, or the symbols within the news, and we can go, okay, don't want to be in New York on that day. So, are we in a position right now, leading into 8/11, where people are reading the symbolic language and foreshadowing shit, something's about to go down? Well, when I first came across this, I sort of came with a very open mind. I'm a very conspiratorial type person, which is just basically a truth seeker. I think the main conspiracy we're living is the conspiracy of the one we're presented by the mainstream narrative, the government, the media, corporations, this idea of reality as it is. Okay, that's the main conspiracy. So I'm anti the conspiracy. I'm more of a truth seeker. And all I've realized along the path is that I don't know really shit, but I sort of see the world in a different way. So when I came across all the stuff around 8/11, I had a lot of information sent to me, and I've been looking on Annette's page. Again, I'm going to link that in the show notes, so you can go and look at her Telegram and Instagram and all that stuff, and look at it with a very open mind. But I was sort of at first like, yeah, okay, sure, I can see, yeah, sure, maybe. But then I started to look a bit deeper into some of the stuff presented around Australia and Sydney and the Harbour Bridge in particular. Then I looked in Hollywood, and then I started looking into the astrology and I started doing some research. And the more that I dug and the more that I looked and the more that I sort of came across things, the more I'm leaning towards the potential of there is something to this. Okay. And whether this is just energetically foreshadowing something that's going to take place within the collective consciousness, or whether it's foreshadowing a specific event, something doesn't feel for me right around this particular time. So I'm not going to go into the symbolism in relation to A11 because that's not, I don't have the time to break that down. I don't have the time to make videos on that. I don't have, it's just not part of my journey. So I encourage you to look up Annette from White Pill as well as Be Free with D and others like them to sort of look at it and use your own discernment. Absolutely. What we're going to take a look at now is right back to 9/11. And before we get into the energetics of 9/11, let's look at what that represented in relation to the shifting of the age out of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius. So for the last 2,000 years, maybe 2,500 years, we've been moving through the age of Pisces and we're about to transition, or we are transitioning, or we already have transitioned into the age of Aquarius. There is no consensus within the astrological community of exactly when or if that has occurred. So this video is not about whether that is or isn't happening. I just look at the symbolism and say, okay, it appears that we're living through the transition of the age abso-freaking-lutely. In the age of Pisces, okay, Pisces is ruled by the planet Jupiter, right? In the age of Pisces, we're in an age of being unconscious, or less collectively, we're in the age of sleep. Jupiter has two names. He's known in Roman mythology as Jupiter and in Greek mythology as Zeus. If you add Jupiter and Zeus together, you get Jupiter, Zeus, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. Okay, we have Jesus, the ruler of Pisces. He was the savior god because as we collectively fell asleep in the age of Pisces, we need to have someone to save us from our sins because what happens to people when they are asleep, when they're unconscious, they fuck up. They fuck over themselves and others and they hurt themselves and others. And Jesus' teaching is, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And he died for our sins, right? It was like sacrifice. Now, Jesus was born of the mother Mary, the Virgin Mary. The sign opposite Pisces is Virgo, known as the Virgin. So out of the Virgin Mary comes Jesus, Jupiter, Zeus, and we are now in his age of Pisces. And it's the age of belief. Okay, so based on our lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, lack of conscious awareness, we are ruled over by our beliefs. So he who controls, or they who control our belief, control our reality. Prior to the age of Pisces, we were in the age of Aries. Prior to that, we were in the age of Taurus because we retrospectively regress through the zodiac in the ages backwards. Okay, so when the sun enters Aries on the 21st of March, it moves forward through Aries and into Taurus and into Gemini. But for the astrological ages, we go backwards through them. It's known as the precession of the equinoxes. And it takes around 25,000 years for us to preside through each of the signs or the constellations. Now, what's happening is there is two things. There is the zodiac, which this is a depiction of, and then there are the constellations in the sky. And the constellations are fixed, whereas the zodiac is only pinned to the equinox point. So when the sun, excuse me, on the 21st of March every year, the sun enters the first degree of Aries. If we were to look directly east at that moment and we would find what constellation are we in? Okay, because we can measure here on Earth the equinox because the equinox is determined by the sun's passing across the ecliptical path. okay, from northern declination to southern declination and vice versa. So at the point that it crosses that ecliptic, right, we have the equinox, equal night, equal day. We can measure that phenomenon, right? And that phenomenon, based on our dating system, is 21st of March every year. But if we look at 21st of March each year, we're not in Aries when that happens. We're in the constellation of Pisces. And what's happening is every 72 years, we slip backwards through a degree of that particular sign. So we have been on the cusp of Pisces Aquarius now, probably for some time. The constellation of Pisces is one of the biggest constellations, much, much bigger than the others. So if we were to divide the constellations, Pisces would have more than 30 degrees, whereas when we divide the zodiac, Pisces only gets 30 degrees. If we were to use a 30-degree measure of Pisces as a constellation, we exited the age of Pisces long ago, probably in the 1800s. So being that we're in the age of Pisces, or we've been living in the age of Pisces, we've been living in the age of the dream, the illusion. We've been asleep consciously at the wheel. Pisces is the sign of the dreamer. We're being governed by our beliefs, and we've been a bit of a slave, because one of the negative archetypes of Virgo is a slave. We've been a slave to the system, and the system really is the church and the state. Now, when we're in the age of Pisces, we're said to be on the mutable cross, and there are three crosses. Okay, there is the mutable cross, which is Sagittarius and Gemini, Pisces and Virgo. That's a cross. Okay, and then the next cross we have would be the fixed cross, Aquarius and Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, because they're fixed signs. And then we have the cardinal cross, which is Capricorn and Cancer, as well as Aries and Libra. If we go back to the cardinal cross, the age before the age of Pisces, we're on the cardinal cross. Okay, and if you want an understanding of what happened when humanity went from the age of Aries into the age of Pisces, watch the series The Game of Thrones. The Game of Thrones is about sitting on the Iron Throne to rule the seven kingdoms. Iron is a metal of Mars, and Mars is the god that rules Aries. Okay, we have Jupiter for Pisces, and then Aquarius, we have Saturn. All right. But if we go back to here now, Mars is the warrior. You live and die by the sword. In the Game of Thrones, the Iron Throne was made of swords, and you rule the seven kingdoms because there are seven traditional planets in astrology. So they're the seven kingdoms, okay? And what happened in that, they had to, at the end of that movie, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the Game of Thrones, please turn off right now. But at the end of the Game of Thrones, the dragon came along and burnt the entire throne and melted the metal of iron. And then who was the person that sat on the throne, so to speak? At the end of that series, it was Brandon, and Brandon was the cripple. Remember the cripple, the Brandon Snow, the brother, sat on the Iron Throne? He was the king of the seven kingdoms. He was a cripple. That's Pisces, okay? Pisces is the cripple. So if you want understanding prior to that, they worship the golden calf, right? Hinduism rose out of the age of Taurus, another word for the age of Gemini, and this is the rise of Buddhism, because Buddha was also a word used to describe Mercury, the god of Gemini. So we move through these ages, right? An age lasts about 2,000, give or take, years. Maybe 2,100, 2,200 years. Some ages are longer and others, some ages are shorter. Age of Pisces is probably one of the longest ages, and it takes 25,000 years for a great year, right? A great year astrologically, or for us in humanity, is about 25,000 years. So right now we're moving out of the age of Pisces, the age of belief, okay, the age of Jupiter. Okay, you're going to need to watch the series Chaos with a K, because that series is foreshadowing the end of the reign of Jupiter, the end of the age of Pisces, and what is happening. Chaos is reigning because we're going through the great transmutation. When we go from one age to a new age, right, we're in water age and we're going to an air age. How do you get water into air? You boil water to create steam, which is air. Aquarius, even though it was the water bearer, it's the age of air. Okay, this is a fixed age of air. And Aquarius, ruled by Saturn, and in modern times Uranus, is the age of knowing. We no longer believe in the age of Pisces. We aren't ruled by belief. I believe in God. Here I need religion to help me believe in God. The Bible, the story of that, and we need that. And we need an external savior God, because we can't save ourselves because we're consciously asleep and we're the victim. We're poor, helpless me. And we're a slave here to the system. Okay? We're in the age of knowing. We know now. Right? We see this is an awakened consciousness. Aquarius is very objective, sees the big picture, crystal clear mindset. Uranus, the co-ruler of Aquarius, is the god of astrology. Okay, so we wake up to our place here in the cosmos in the age of Aquarius. So when we're going through this transmutation of the ages, you've got to boil Pisces water to get to the air, and then you always transmute in this period here. Look at the trans movement. They're telling you with the trans movement. We're here. We're right here. Now, what they need to do as we move out of one age to the other is they need to destroy the symbolism of Pisces and Virgo, as well as Gemini and Sagittarius, because they're part of the cross. Now, they've already taken down Gemini and Sagittarius. Why? Because on September 11, 2001, they destroyed the twin towers. Gemini is the only sign of the zodiac of the twins. What we're going to do shortly is look at the symbolism associated astrologically to 9/11 so we can see that that's what that ritual was about. Now, Gemini is mutable air and Sagittarius is mutable fire. And 9/11 was a fire and air ritual because they flew planes as a bomb. You could look at that as a bit of an arrow. Sagittarius. Ding, being flown into the twins, the Geminis, right? And destroying it. We had the coming down of the beginning of the coming down of the illusion, the mind control. Pre 9/11, you could look collectively in this world, we're under immense mind control, okay? Post 9/11, we started to break our mind control. The Matrix, all about the Matrix mind control system, came out in 1999, just a year and a half before September 11. Again, foreshadowing this particular event because they're basically saying, well, it's the end of this mind control. You've got to now wake up, and we're going to slowly let you wake up. Okay. And as you do, everyone on their awakening journey realizes this. You wake up into what? The negative of Pisces is a fucking nightmare because you're out of the dream and now you're in a nightmare, and this world's a nightmare. Absolutely. And it's being run by, maniacs and occultists and those with hidden agendas. Because why? Because we've been asleep. So those that knew did what the fuck they wanted. So yes, you could say that there were some people pre 9/11 that were awake. Good to them. Were they in the minority? Absolutely. Did you know any of them? I personally didn't. But even post 9/11, people coming out saying, "Oh, I knew it was coming." Like now, though, it's a bit of a different story. Now, most sane thinking people know, yeah, the official story of 9/11 wasn't, something else happened there. Don't think it was Osama bin Laden as they told us it was. So, we've broken that mind control. And the other aspect of this was Sagittarius, which was that really triggered the war on terror, which was really an ideological war. It was like this terrorism, which was fundamentalism and Muslims and Islam and all of that. This is that sort of religious aspect. It started this religious war from 9/11. Okay, so that was the bringing down of this part of the cross. So now we've got Pisces and we've got Virgo, and that's mutable water, right? Think water and anything associated with water, bridges, the ocean. Think the earth in its mutable form. what happens to the Earth when there is a volcano, when there is a landslide, when there is an earthquake, when there is a tsunami? The Earth moves. Okay, so we've got this ritual now to play out because they need to destroy this axis to free us to move into this next axis of the fixed signs. Okay, so whether 811 is the ritual for the Pisces and Virgo, ritual, or whether it's something else, we are going to at some point in our lifetime experience them destroying the symbolism and taking us off that cross. That's definitely going to happen. Okay, it's no two ways about that, because that's what we have to do. This is about the evolution of collective consciousness, of the journey of the soul, of man's part to play here. Like this is the great wheel. This is the great work. This is the, this is it. This is it. This is what life is about. Life isn't about going to work and having a job and paying your taxes, being a celebrity, or like following a football team, or having a dog. That's not what life's about. These are the trappings of life. Life is about awakening. Life is about enlightenment. Life is about love. Life is about the journey of transformation. And we're returning home to source. Ram Dass is saying we're all walking each other home. Where is home? Source. What is source? It's the union of the soul with the all. Okay, so individually and collectively, that's what we're doing here. And this great alchemical circle, this magical wheel of this cosmic sort of nature, this is our map. So this is what's taking place. I want you to keep that in mind as we sort of look at this, and I want you to sort of think like, well, how could they do this? And like, even if, again, nothing happens, certainly 9/11 happened, didn't it? Certainly was. So let's take a look at the symbolism around 9/11, in particular, what was happening astrologically, but also within the USA birth chart. So here we're going to take a look at the USA birth charts for 4th of July, 1776, 5:10 p.m. Philadelphia. It's one of the most widely used birth charts for the independence, Declaration of Independence for America. The thing about birth charts, especially when it comes to countries, people might say, well, the country existed before the independence. What about the Native Americans? And you're absolutely right. But what we're looking at here is an idea of what the country represents. And you could say that the birth of the idea of America was really around the independence, the Declaration of Independence. We'll address this same issue shortly with the Australia birth chart, and I could find up to 3 different birth charts for Australia. And obviously, before those birth charts existed, Australia existed. So again, we're sort of limited with what we can do in relation to that. We just have to go with what we know. And in this case, we're using this as the birth chart, 12 degrees Sagittarius rising. So one thing that I found very useful, and I've adopted from a lot of other professional astrologers that are well respected, is a technique called directed solar arcs. And what we do is we move planets' positions within a birth chart forward in time at the rate of 1 degree per year, following the path of the sun. For example, if we looked at, in one particular whole day, we have symbolically a whole year. When the sun rises at 6 a.m., that's equivalent to spring. Okay, the first light, new life, that's spring. Okay, but when the sun reaches 12 p.m. in the daytime, that's equivalent to summer. The sun has reached the hottest part of the day, the brightest part of the day, and we could look at 12 p.m. as being, symbolic of summer. And then we have sun at sundown, 6 p.m., and that would be symbolic of fall. It's setting for the day. So we've got light, but we're losing it fast. And it's the end of that cycle of the sun for that period of light. So that's associated with our fall season. And then we get the sun at midnight, and there is no sun, the darkest, coldest part of the night, the most blackest, and there's no light. And that's what winter represents. So you can see that symbolically in each day, there is, a whole year being played out. So if we move the sun every day after the birth of you or a nation, then we're looking at symbolically each day because the sun moves a degree a day. We're looking at a whole year of energy play out. And for whatever reason, our ancestors discovered this technique via directing or progressing a chart from its birth through time to have a look at certain indicators. And what it does is it maps out how this potential alignments and the energetics of what they represent unfold in time. So the directed solar arc technique I like for timing of particular events. It's a really good predictive tool. And the difference between secondary progressions, excuse me, and directions is secondary progressions moves the planet at its own rate of pace, whereas directed solar arcs moves all the planets at the same rate as the sun would move, which is 1 degree per year. So again, if this is complicated to you, don't worry, it's pretty advanced astro stuff. In my year ahead readings, we use directed solar arcs, progressions, and transits to help map out your path ahead, not just looking at your birth chart and making predictions. There are charts that we use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the directed solar arcs for 9/11 on the USA chart. So we take the planets and we move them in time from 1776 right through to 2001. This beautiful software from AstroGold does that for me very easily at the click of a button. So what I've got now is the secondary chart here. I've got what's called a bi-wheel. On the inner wheel, which is this wheel, okay, going around like this, I have the birth chart of America, and on this outer wheel now, I have the directed solar arcs, okay? So, interestingly, the rising sign, okay, of a nation depicts the people of the people in their predisposition. Okay, this over here of a birth chart of a nation, this is your foreign relations, this is your public reputation or your governing body, and this is the land or the home of the people. So the angles of a chart are pretty significant, and they represent some pretty sort of sensitive points within the birth chart. What struck me instantly was Pluto's direction at 11 degrees of Virgo, moving into a square to 12 degrees of Sagittarius on 9/11. So there is a square from Pluto to the ascendant on that particular day. And that really stood out to me as something very significant. We also had directed Mars onto the south node. We had the directed Sun onto the moon. And for the American birth chart, the moon's super important because you've got the Sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and Venus all in Cancer. And we've got the moon in Aquarius. So America is known as the mother country, but it's also known as the land of the free, okay? Because Aquarius is about freedom and individuality and independence. And that moon is the ruler of all of this Cancer energy here, which is the mother country. Okay, so interestingly, you had an activation of the moon, you had Mars, God of War on the south node, something ending here. So not only do we have Pluto squaring the ascendant, we also had Saturn squaring the moon. And again, the moon being a very significant planet for the USA birth chart. So this was the solar directions telling me that there is an activation of plutonic energy, which is transformation through crisis, of attacks, Mars, okay, on the south node. Something very significant to do with the whole birth of that country. Something from the past, something coming to an end. We also had Saturn here squaring the moon. So we've got sort of this attack or this death or this change or this challenge to the people. And then the sun highlighting the moon, it really sort of brought everything in to consciousness and to the awareness of the people. I think the two most watched events ever on TV have been the moon landing. It wasn't the USA supposedly the first country to step on the moon? Because they're the mother country ruled by the moon, interestingly. And then, it was 9/11 was the second event. So then the other thing I want to do is throw over the top the transits. So what was happening cosmically in 9/11 in the sky Well, Pluto was at 12 degrees Sagittarius. So this is the directed one from the birth chart. This is taking their Pluto in Capricorn from 1776 and directing it all the way around for a day, for a year, right till we get to here. And it's sitting across their midheaven, squaring their ascendant as transiting Pluto in the sky is coming into an alignment with the USA ascendant and directly opposite Saturn, opposition to Pluto, and Saturn is in Gemini in the seventh house, which is foreign. So foreign attack, okay, on Gemini, and you brought down the twins, the twin towers. So I'm not going to go too much deeper than that because I feel like just those alignments alone are very significant. If we look at what was happening to the USA birth chart via direction, via transit on that particular day, again, if you're an astrologer back then practicing and looking into this with this software and saying, oh shit, something very significant's most likely going to go down here. This is going to be like a major mass event, mass casualty, crisis driven. You know, there's going to be an ideological component here. This is an attack on the home, right? On the mother country. There's going to be an association to Gemini and what that represents. Then all of the media control around that time. Also in relation to the economy and the fiat, phony, fake system of money and what happened around then. So there's a lot happening astrologically in that particular event. So now we're going to take a really brief look at the astrology for 8/11 and just look at what's happening in the cosmos at this time. So when we look at the astrology of the moment, we're looking at the transits, so what's happening. So we just had a Aries full moon. We all experience an Aries full moon around the world. It's just how it impacts us in our own personal birth chart is whether it's significant and in what way. But we're all under that influence or that correlation, if you like. It's just not always going to affect everyone in the same way because we're all different and we have different birth charts. So different birth charts interact with these cosmic energies in different way. And a birth chart is just a depiction of your own unique energetic frequency, your soul's aura, if you want to look at it like that. So, yeah, when we look at the 8/11, what we're going to do is just look at some of the key alignments for that particular time. And then we're going to then bring this into context to the Australia birth chart, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and also the astrocartography. But I am also going to do a part two for this particular part because it's going to get too long for this particular video. So we'll take a brief look at the astrology for 8/11, and then in the second part of this video, which will be out very soon in the next week, before the 8/11 event, we will take a look at this in context to Australia's birth chart. If you watch my previous video on the Mars retrograde cycle, Mars attacks, you'll know that I was highlighting the Mars-Pluto opposition through this Mars retrograde cycle as being a massive turning point and one to watch. In fact, for 210 days, Mars will be in the same part of the sky, and I said that by the time we get to the end of this 210-day period, which is about May next year, the world isn't going to look the same way. Your life is not going to look the same way. This is going to be a pretty massive turning point for us all. So on 8/11 at 11 a.m., and this is set for where I live or lived in Tugun, Australia, it's pretty much by activation of the moon, this is pretty much a significant Mars-Pluto moment. So Mars will actually have been moving into an opposition to Pluto actually when this video goes live. So hopefully it's Sunday the 20th of October I'm recording it. So hopefully it'll be live tonight or if not tomorrow sometime. Mars is already in opposition to Pluto. It's just not exact yet. I think the exact opposition is, late October, if not very early November. But by the time we get to the 8th, Mars has moved into the sign of Leo. Okay, and it's directly opposite now, not only Pluto in Capricorn, but by a degree, the moon has come around and we have the moon triggering that Mars opposition. So look at the moon as exactly that. it's a trigger to what other energetics are already there. So even though the Mars-Pluto opposition has been happening for a week or so, or maybe 10 days up until this point, that moon energy really brings forth a lot more of a potency to this opposition. If we go back about 7 days before this, around early November, we would have had a Scorpio new moon. And that's very significant because for this Mars-Pluto opposition, both Mars and Pluto are the co-rulers of Scorpio, and Scorpio is the sign of death and rebirth, transformation, irrevocable change. So we're going to have the sun and then the new moon that was a Scorpio new moon. So the new moon was seeded with this Scorpio energy. It's going to move forward past Pluto and then move into Aquarius. And as it does that, it's going to be exactly opposite Mars. So that's a real flashpoint in the cycle of Mars-Pluto. It's a real activation point. I'd be surprised, irrespective of what goes down or what doesn't go down on 8/11, I'd be surprised if there is not some catastrophic crisis, death, carnage, accident. When we're dealing with Mars, we're dealing with accidents. We're also dealing with attacks, and we're dealing with all sort of martial attacks too. So accidents involving cutting oneself, abrasion of the skin, blood issues, knives, anything that's an attack, using sharp objects. Not a day to schedule your surgery on that particular day. Absolutely. The other thing that's interesting about this is we're going to have Venus, and she's the ruler of Taurus, and we're going to have Uranus in a square and a half, known as a sesqui-square. So that's an interesting alignment. And Venus at 25 degrees of Sagittarius at this time is out of bounds. So when a planet moves out of bounds, it's moved out of the path of the ecliptic. And Venus out of bounds is a little bit rogue. Venus is the heart, okay? Leo's the heart and Venus is the heart. The Venus of the heart is through love, and Leo is the actual ruler of the physical heart. So, this is an interesting thing. And then you could look at this Uranus energy as always dealing with sudden upheaval or disruptions or changes, something of a really sudden nature. There is a bit of a loose square as well from Venus to Neptune in Pisces. And then we've got Saturn over here in Pisces as well. So exactly 12 degrees of Pisces. If you remember back to the USA chart, 12 degrees of Pisces for Saturn makes it square exactly to the USA's ascendant. We're going to cover the USA in another video soon. But yeah, very significant degrees. This is a pretty hectic moment astrologically, via this moon activation, via Venus out of bounds, semi-square, or sorry, square and a half to Uranus, the planet of change and upheaval. And then we've got the sun in 16 degrees of Scorpio. I want you to remember that degree when we take a look at the Australia birth chart. And Saturn also at 12 degrees and what that activates within the Australia birth chart. So this is pretty significant astrological alignment on this particular day on 8/11, but it gets even more interesting when we put it into context to the Australian birth chart and the Sydney Harbour Bridge. What we'll do now, before we end this video, is we'll take a look at the astrocartography for this alignment at 11 a.m. and we'll look at it in context to, Sydney, Australia. Interestingly, when we set the chart for Sydney's location, we have this opposition between the moon and Saturn with the Pluto energy there, directly across the ascendant descendant for that particular time. So we would have ascending moon Pluto and descending Mars happening that time. The descendants where things die, and the ascendants where things are born, right? It's rising of the energy there. So if we look at where this alignment travels across the Earth is what I'm particularly interested in. Here is the geodic map for that particular moment in time based on the location of Sydney. We've got the Mars, Moon, Pluto. So we've got the Moon and Pluto rising, and the Mars setting running across these lines here. So you can sort of see directly across Sydney and pretty much most of the east coast of Australia, right up until about Brisbane, you have this Mars, Pluto, Moon energy. So, and even parts of Tasmania here as well, where this energy runs across there at precisely 11 a.m. in the morning. So again, this is the moon triggering this significant opposition, and then looking at these lines running across the Earth. What I'm looking at is if we took the Earth and we took where these planetary lines would sort of dissect the Earth, that's what we're looking at here. So these are used in relocation and astrocartography, looking at certain energetic lines, whether it's a birth chart or a map of a country or so on and so forth, in relation to the Earth. And you can map out certain events, weather events, geological events, and look at significant alignments at that particular time. Interesting as well, you have running right through the center of Australia around Uluru, you'll have the North Node, South Node. So this sort of karmic line running right in the middle of Australia as you have the activation of the Mars-Pluto opposition by the Moon running across the eastern seaboard and pretty much bang on top of Sydney, Australia. Brisbane and the East Coast is not sort of untouched by this energy as well. So are we going to see something play out in this particular zone of the moon, of the Mars-Pluto nature? It's highly probable. So because of the time of this video and also what I've got to go ahead, I've decided to cut this video now and make a second part. In the second part, we're going to look at the Australia birth chart. We're going to look at the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and we're going to just give you a few different points of view and perspectives. Like I began with in this video, this isn't about trying to scare people or create hysteria. This is just about presenting information in a particular way, looking historical data, understanding the occult and symbolism, and looking at things tied into the date around 8/11. Again, those numbers are very symbolic, and for people that are in high places that are obviously adept within occult lore, symbolism and esotericism, these things matter significantly. For the average Joe, it's just like, you're crazy, you're a loony, you know what you're talking about, and for very good reason. However, like I've established in this video, that we're at the end of the Age of Pisces, so the illusion is being destroyed and the old ways are coming down, and it's time to wake up. See you on the next video. Peace out. Balloons.